Hey y'all. Hey. Welcome back to another episode of the Praying Single Mom podcast. I'm always so excited to be back with you guys, and I'm even more excited tonight because we do have a special guest. Tonight we have Miss Osayi Lasisi, and she's a parenting coach. She's going to be dropping nuggets on tonight. She's going to be sharing tips with moms who are listening in all over on how to connect with your child so that you can get them to listen to you. How many of us need that? How many of us know that sometimes our children, no matter the age, they don't always like to listen. And so I'm so excited as a mom myself to get nuggets on how to connect with my children, so that we can get them to listen and connect back with us. So who is Asai? She's a devoted mother of two, a passionate parenting coach who created the Connect to Influencing parenting method. She specializes in helping parents build deep, empathetic connections with their children to positively influence their development. And you can sign up for her weekly newsletter as well as full of effective parenting strategies at osayilasisi.com/connect. And of course, this will be in our show notes for this week. So without further ado, we just want to say welcome, and we're so excited to have you on.
Hi, Lakeisha. Thank you for having me on. I'm so excited to talk about this. Thank you.
Yes, of course, of course. So after I get the bio out of the way, I love to ask you guys, if you were standing right next to someone or even in an elevator with someone and they asked, who is Osayi, what would you tell them?
Oh man, so many things. But I think the main thing is Osayi is just full of joy. So thankful, thankful to be alive, thankful to be a woman. Because I didn't always feel thankful to be a woman. I was like, oh my gosh, I have four brothers. So it was always like, why am I a girl and stuff? So I'm thankful to be a woman, thankful to be alive, thankful to be a mom. I just feel like life is so full of joy. And then I can go into all the details that people might be interested in. But for now, I just say that I'm super thankful for the life that God has given me.
I love that so much. And I can relate, being thankful to be a woman. A lot of times we don't see that as an honor and a privilege, to be a woman. And so I love that so much. And so I know tonight you're going to be speaking with us on how to connect with our children to get them to listen to us. Can you take us into the space of being a parenting coach? Like, when did you become a coach and how did this come about?
So it's such a great story because I'm Nigerian. I lived in the US for a while, then I lived in Nigeria for a while, then I live in Canada now. I've just lived all over the world. And when I was younger, I knew that we had some conflict with my parents, but I just thought, they don't understand me. But then as I had my own kids, I started to see those kinds of conflicts again. And I found that the way that we were taught to raise kids in Nigeria or as African or as Black people was so different from the expectations that kids have of their parents now. And so I was really struggling and just trying to figure things out. And so I was asking people questions, I was researching things. And then I started taking my certification, became certified as a parenting coach because I found that there are certain things that we never learned. At least I never learned. And that parenting is a skill. It's not necessarily you're a bad mom, you're a good mom. It's just a skill. Like, oh, okay, I need to learn a little bit more about this part. I need to learn about communication. I need to learn about brain development, all those kinds of things. And I started testing things out on my kids. So they're like the first people I tested things out. And then working with clients, and I found out that, like I said, it's a skill. We get better the more we practice, and we kind of have to rewire our responses. And it's been so rewarding. It's been challenging. Don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean like when you get this skill, everything is going to be like so super easy. It's kind of like driving or riding a bike. There will still be like people out there who don't know how to drive quite right, or there'll be people who are having bad days and might, cut you off and stuff, and you have to remember to respond quickly. But you'll know that, okay, it's not personal. And so that's kind of how I got here.
I love that so much. I've never heard anyone say that parenting is a skill, but you know what? I love that. I love that, especially being someone who loves to learn. I always consider myself to be a student, you know. I love to learn, and I would have to agree, being a mom of two, that I learn parenting every single day. I'm always learning something. My children, they're teaching me things, whether it be books, whether it be coaches like yourself. Parenting is a skill. And so for those of you who are listening in who think, you're doing this all wrong, what if we told you that, it's normal to be doing it all wrong? It's a skill we're learning every single day. So I absolutely love that. I really do. Osayi, what some of your experience with connecting with your children and getting them to listen to you, and how has that process been?
Yeah. So when I respond with my children, which respond to them and things like that, I'm always thinking about maintaining that connection. And so I'm always trying to figure out what things can I do to help me not to be so triggered or to be so like aggravated about things. Because a lot of times as parents, it's because we have like these little things that trigger us. And that's why we can't really hear our children when they're speaking. So I can give you one example is bedtime. Go and take a bath and go to bed. I don't know what it is. They don't want to go to sleep, but once their head hits the pillow, they're out. But just getting them to go take a bath and go to bed is like you're punishing them and stuff. But there was a time that I just chose to listen and say, why is it that you don't want to go take a bath right now? And and then my daughter said, well, if I go take a bath right now, it just feels early to me. And then I'm gonna have so much time and I'm gonna be bored and stuff. And it kind of makes sense, right? Like it makes sense that you're thinking about the rest of your night and you're thinking, this is not the best time for me to take a bath. Even though I, as the parent, might say that, for the child, she's thinking it's not the best time. And so, one of the things that I've learned is just asking that question, like, what's going on for you? Why are you resisting? And then there are times where the right thing that has worked is saying, okay, we're going to do a competition. Who can take their bath more quickly? And then it's a competition, and then people go ahead and take their bath. So, not every single time. It's not that I do the same thing every time, but I've learned different skills to kind of try and see if that helps us. So whether it's bedtime, whether it's getting ready for dinner, whether it's we're about to go out, let's all get ready, those kinds of things. It all depends on the situation. But when I come to the conversation, to the conflict with a place of curiosity, being that I'm the grown up, so I need to be the responsible one, to be the calm one. I always find out that, oh, okay, whatever it is that's going on in their mind makes sense to them. And if I had that perspective, I would most likely think the same thing as well. Then I can respond in the right way, as opposed to, you're just being stubborn. You're not being a good listener. You're just hard headed, that kind of thing. So I'd say those are the experiences that I've had personally.
I love that. And so, from what I'm hearing, you're assessing the situation as a whole. A lot of times, as parents, I can speak for myself when growing up. When adults tell you to do something, they don't want you to question it, and they don't want to hear any back talk. Just do what I said, and so I am the type of mom as well. I like to assess the situation. What are you doing in that moment? Especially being a behavior therapist, I work in pediatrics. So a lot of times we have to identify the antecedent. We have to identify what's happening prior to that behavior or prior to that disagreement, or whether or not they agree. And so I love how you get into the child's mind, you get into their mind and you kind of question, like you said, you assess it with curiosity and you're asking questions. You're asking questions, whether it be to yourself, like, why don't you want to do this? I had to ask my daughter, when I would ask her to clean up, it would be a big thing. She doesn't like to do it. So I just asked her one day, why don't you want to clean up? And she just said, it's just something I don't like to do. It's a big task and it just feels overwhelming for me. And so since then, once I asked her that question, now I'm able to approach it differently. Maybe I can say, hey, I can help you this time. And so, what are some tips that you would give moms for being able to connect with their children? Even, and I'll give an example for the school is about to start back. Children, they don't care to do homework all the time. What are some tips you would give that mom who's struggling with, their child doing their homework?
Hmm. That's such a good question. First of all, I would even question, why do they even give kids so much homework? Like, is this necessary? Why can't they learn in school? But it's such a good question because oftentimes people ask me, what do you do in this situation? Or this happens, what do you do? And to be frank, I can't tell you XYZ, but what I would say is you can observe your child and you can respond in the right way. And so the main thing I would really encourage parents to focus on is realizing that your child can either be in one of these three stages within like brain development and their emotional state. They can either be in their survival state where they're just like, I need to survive this situation. So I'm either going to fight you or I'm going to run away from you, or I'm just going to do whatever you ask me to do because I'm just like nervous. Or they could be in their emotional stage where it's kind of like, I hate you, you hate me, and whatever. Or they can be in the executive functioning stage. And that executive functioning stage doesn't get completely developed until 25, which I'm sure you know. So they're still learning executive functioning. Now, if you approach your child about homework and you see them like, yeah, she did that, then you know they're not in the best stage. They're not feeling safe. You can try to force them to do it. And some kids might respond and do it, and you'll feel like, I accomplished what I wanted to. But if you want to maintain that connection, then the best thing you can do is to get them back up to the executive stage. And so, what I like to say is kind of, I like to say this because it's different. It's like calm them up. Like instead of calming down, calm them up from their survival brain to the emotional brain to the executive functioning brain. And so when they're there, like, there are kids that when they're happy, you can ask them to do, even kids that don't like to clean up, they're enjoying cleaning up because they're in a happy stage, right? So when it comes to homework, there might be a reason that they're pushing back. Maybe it's challenging. Maybe they're tired from the day. Maybe they just feel like they want to play at this moment. Maybe there's so many different reasons depending on what's going on with your child that day or just the personality of the child. And so you can either choose to assess it and ask them what's going on for them and let them start to feel that safety and let them know that there's nothing wrong with them, because oftentimes kids take things personally when they don't understand something. They're like, there's something wrong with me. I'm always failing this. This is too hard for me. There's something wrong with me. So this might actually be an opportunity for you to let them know that there's nothing wrong with them. This is a learning opportunity. It's supposed to be hard. It's hard. It feels hard because it's hard. Those kinds of things. And then build that muscle within them so that they expand their comfort level with discomfort. So whatever the situation is, look for ways to calm them up to the executive functioning state. And the way to do that is to help them feel safe. Let them know that they're loved. Let them know that there's nothing wrong with struggling. Let them know that you're just curious about how you can help them. And there might be times, this is a tough one, but there might be times that the homework might not be the most important thing that day. And it might be something that, okay, let's postpone for another time. Because oftentimes we're so crunched for time. We're like, if we don't get it done now, tomorrow's going to be stressful, da 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 da. But what I found is that when kids are in a good mood and things are feeling good, time can stretch. You can get things done within 5 minutes that would have taken an hour when they're in a bad mood. And so giving your child that feeling of safety and love is actually the first step of what you would want to do. Or I say the second step, but the first step in what I always coach is getting yourself calm, because oftentimes we personalize our children's responses and we're like, oh, I'm a bad parent, oh, I'm this, oh, I'm that, how dare they push back, and all of that stuff. So the first step I'd say is calming yourself down and then understanding what's going on with your child.
I love that. I love that so much. And it makes tons of sense to me. And I know the moms who are listening in who may have struggled with their own personal childhood trauma, and they may have not seen healthy parenting. I want you guys to know that this is possible. Many of us who are listening in, we haven't. We've all experienced something as a child. And so I love the strategy of calming your child up. I love that because I always say don't add fire to fire.
That's
And I
good.
always tell my children as well, if I'm not in a good mood or if someone else is not in a good mood, don't try to go add fire on fire. And that simply means if they assess the state that they're in, you know, if your child has had a long day at school, and they come directly in the door and the first thing that you're telling them to do is their homework, you're going to get that pushback because they're not in the mood. They're human just like you, and they need mental breaks. They need time to just decompress and get their thoughts together as well. So I absolutely love that. And again, in the industry that I'm in, we consider those things to be antecedent strategies as well. Providing therapy to children with autism, we can't just go directly in without pairing with the child. We want to make sure that we're making it fun for them, making sure that their energy is up, like you talked about, calming your child up. And so I absolutely know that these are proven strategies, and I know that they work. I know that they
Mm-hmm.
work 100%. For some parents who may not agree with this method, can you kind of talk a little bit about why is it so important to connect with your child even at a young age? I know you mentioned certain things don't register until the age of 25, but why would it be important to connect with your child at a young age?
Mm. That is such a good question. And this is why I'm so passionate about talking with Black people and talking with African people. For some reason, we believe that, well, not for some reason, I know the reason why, but we believe that, yelling at our kids, beating our kids not talking back, all of that stuff is our way. That's the Black way. That's the African way. If your child is talking back, they have an attitude, you're not raising them right, all of that stuff. But what we found in the research is that, at least based on Africans, and I like to believe that we as Black people, we all came from Africa, at some point. As Africans, that was not our way of raising our children. We raised our
Mhm.
children in the villages, like communities where everybody was involved. My favorite way of disciplining was telling stories that would help the children to learn different skills. And then we would go with them, whether we were farmers or we're merchants or whatever. We'd take our children with us, and they're learning different skills that way. Yes, there were people in the community that were abusive and yelling and stuff. And it was like, yeah, that person, beats his kids and then beats his wife. And, ooh, it's tough, but that's what they do. It was never like we esteem it until we started to have colonization, and we started to have the enslavement of people, and we started to have colonization through different kinds of schools where they would say, oh, we're trying to teach you this kind of way of doing things. And so they would beat the kids, and then they kept telling us like that's the way to do things. But we somehow took it upon ourselves like this is normal. The way that the people who were colonizing human beings were beating the enslaved people, and we've taken that and using it as the way that we discipline our children. So somewhere we lost that understanding that that was more of an abusive treatment, and that was a treatment of coming from people who were frustrated, and they were just trying to like choke out hope from people, and not that this is actually the right way to do things. And so that's one thing that I always try to help people understand, that it's not the Black way, it's not the African way. As a matter of fact, we got it from those colonizers or whatever. Um, and so that's something that we need to really know, that it's not the Black way. That's one. And then two, when we think about, like, the science has shown us that even kids that look like they're doing well, because a lot of people say, yeah, you can't beat me and look at me, I'm doing all right. when we dig deep, we find that a lot of people are dealing with trauma. We find that they're also yelling at their kids, they're yelling at their spouses, they're yelling when things don't go right. They're dealing with a lot of anxiety. They're anxious about, their boss calls them into the office and immediately they're like, oh, is he going to fire me or is she going to fire me? Because there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of value that's tied to performance. We're anxious about our weight. We're thinking that, oh, we're not desired because we've gotten used to this whole idea of being valued is based on what we do, not who we are. And so there's been a
Yeah.
lot of research around it about this idea of just being a human being that feels valued, and realizing that a lot of us are dealing with that trauma. So even though we're walking around saying, oh, we're all right, we're not quite all right. And that's where a lot of our rage comes up and our anger comes from. So that's something that we need to like really look at in ourselves and be like, am I really all right? Because I know I've been to therapy, I still go to therapy. I know that I'm not really all right. I mean, I'm getting better, and that's how I'm building those skills. So that's the second thing that I always want to mention, that when people say, oh, I'm doing okay. And then the third thing is there's this fear that when our children don't do exactly what we ask them to do, then they're going to be like these bad kids and they're gonna run around or they're gonna get in trouble. And then in the middle of the night, we're gonna hear from the police that, oh, they broke into something or they beat somebody or they're dead or whatever. Like mine gets to this extreme. The challenge is that that's actually the opposite, because when kids do not feel heard or valued, then they hide things from us and
Mhm.
that we're not able to influence them. And that's where the methodology, my method came from, which is the connect to influence. Nobody came into this world to be controlled. However, we can choose to be influenced. And so I grew up with kids who would hide things. Their parents didn't know where they were. They would dress a certain way, leaving the house and get to school looking a different way, all of those things because of the strictness at home and the lack of communication. So when I encourage parents, I say, you want your children to feel safe telling you anything, even the things that make you uncomfortable, even the things that make you afraid, because you can guide them to make better decisions. As
Mhm.
opposed to they go to their friends and ask for advice. Of course, their friends will give them advice that doesn't make any sense because their friends are young too. So you want them to come to you and you can advise them and you can guide them and you can tell them about your family values and the reason why you have these family values. So it's not about you don't tell them what to do. That's permissive parenting. That doesn't really help anybody. It's about saying we have these boundaries. These are the reasons for the boundaries. And this is how I want to guide you. And I'm happy to answer your questions. But helping them, once again, even when they feel like they're not getting what they want, kind of calm up and realize that in the end, we're trying to protect you in the part of things that you don't quite know, right? And then as you get older and you're more responsible for yourself, you make your own decisions. But while you're young and you are my responsibility, I want to guide you and I want to keep guiding you even when you're a grown up, because there's some things that I've experienced. But that's why it's important to stay connected, because there's so many things about like how we can support them, and then there are a lot of negative things when we're not there to guide them and when we are essentially fighting them because we believe that they are not responding the way we want them to respond.
I love that so much. Just in that in itself, you dropped so many different nuggets just then. What stood out to me was the I'm okay. I went through the beating, or as a child, went through the beating and I turned out okay. But deep down, like you said, when we dig a little deeper, when we finally do go to therapy, or when we find ourselves yelling at our children or sounding just like our parents or grandparents or even our spouses, like you talked about, or even just how we handle situations such as the anxious attachments, that spoke so many different volumes. And so this is why it's important to connect with your child. This is why it's important to connect with our children, especially early intervention, early on in those childhood elementary years. Is so important because we are our children's first teachers. We are their first teachers, and we teach them how to do life. We teach them how to do life. And so you're not only connecting with your child to get them to listen to you, you're connecting with your child to get them to listen to the Lord. You're connecting with them to get them to listen to their boss one day, to listen to their teachers, their friends, on how to communicate. Like you said, you're offering them your perspective as well. And so there were just so many different nuggets in that. And this episode has blessed me already. Do you have any more tips or anything that's on your heart that you would like to share, with the moms that are listening in?
Mm. Um, we talked about brain development. We talked about a few things. So I want to kind of break things down. So I usually like to say it's 5 things that we need to be aware of to stay connected with our children so we can influence them. The first thing is just learning our own triggers, learning our own self so that we can calm ourselves up as well. Because I find that it's hard to do all the things you want to do with your kids or respond the way you want to respond if your mind is going all over the place, your emotions are going all over the place. So the first step is always figuring out how to get yourself together when you're feeling triggered, or postponing the conversation or whatever you need to do until you feel like, okay, I'm back centered, I'm back in my executive state. So that's number one. Two is just understanding brain development, understanding that, my child is 3 or my child is 10 or whatever the age is. This thing that I'm expecting from them, is it realistic for them to really be able to do this thing? Not based on, oh, when I was a child, I had to do it, so I learned it. That could be a trauma response. But really, like brain development wise, is it something that they really need to be able to do? Or can you collaborate so that you can support them? Like screen time is one of the things that's a big deal. Is it really appropriate for you to just expect that your child will see their device there and they won't pick it up, or they'll pick it up and they'll stop using it because they promised you they'll stop in 30 minutes or an hour, when the device is like, it's made to just give you a lot of dopamine and it can be addictive. So just figuring things out about like the way the brain develops. Then the third thing I always try to encourage my clients is understanding nervous system science and sensory responses, and just like sensory, because a lot of sensory issues happen with us. So I've worked with people who have children like to bite things, and the parents get upset because they're biting their jackets, they're biting their clothes, they're making their clothes wear out more quickly. But it's like a sensory thing for them. They just need something in their mouths, and so you can decide that, oh, I can give them like an item that they can chew on, and they have all sorts of like fidgets that you can actually chew on and support them. So understand nervous system science and sensory issues. And then I'd say the fourth thing is always being just like knowing your own child, because there are developmental milestones where your child might not be there or they might be advanced, whatever. So paying attention to your child in that situation, the context of that day, that's always very helpful when you're able to pay attention in that specific moment. And then the final thing is that it's never too late. Even if you didn't respond the way you thought you wanted to respond, just remembering that reconnection is also a very important skill. Reconnecting with your child, letting them know that, okay, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, or whatever it is. It's just like reconnecting, letting them know that they're valued and it's important for you to reconnect with them. I'd say, so those are the 5 things I always like to highlight to my clients, and then we go deeper within that. But when you remember those 5 things, whenever you're in any situation, like remembering to just calm yourself up, like figuring out, okay, where am I right now? Okay, I'm triggered. This might not be a good time. And then going from there, it's usually you're able to respond in a better way, in the way that you would want to respond, as opposed to just like reacting because this thing happened and you just like kind of flared up.
Absolutely. I love those. And so we have to learn our own triggers. That's a big one for us. And a lot of times we don't want to touch on that because it's painful. It's
Mhm.
painful learning what triggers you. Some of the things that triggered you are as a result of how you grew up, how you were raised, how your mom responded to you. And so learning your own triggers as well as calming yourself up. A lot of times I remember early on when I first became a mom, I dealt with a lot of mom guilt. I remember the only way I knew to respond was to yell. And going into a situation situation, frustrated, just getting off work. I'm already overstimulated. And I was wondering, like, I remember I cried out to God and asked him, why do I yell at my children so much? And I just really had to learn more about myself, what triggers me, assess my emotional capacity in that moment. And so even before saying anything to my children, you know, in this age, I make sure that I'm in a good headspace. If I'm not, I'll let them know, you know, I need some time. I need a moment. Let me calm down, you know, let me just have some time alone. And then I'll go in and have a conversation with them. But that's just building that muscle that you talked about, the parenting skill. And so I know that to be a proven fact that works as well. Now, understanding the brain development, that could be different. So that is also important because a lot of times we expect our children from ages 5 to be doing things that a high schooler would do. And then when they don't do it, we're frustrated with them. But at the end of the day, they're only 5, you know, and we may have at the age of 8 been in the kitchen cooking our own food, or, you know, doing things alone, because we were probably raised by single moms, or your dad was out working. But it's a trauma response like you talked about, and you don't want to repeat or duplicate that pattern. So I also love that one as well. And understanding the nervous system and sensory responses is probably one of my favorite ones as a behavior therapist, because just being able to identify, especially children who suffer from ADHD, or not even suffer from ADHD, but who's dealing with any neurological disorders, sensory responses, nervous system, all of those things play a big, big, big part in why your child responds the way that they do. So I know that one to be so important. Knowing your own child. That is also key. And number 5 is a big one, because I hear about this all the time, especially in the praying single mom community, where parents just feel like it's too late. But so to know that it's never too late, even with me, I'm 34 years old, there are still things that my mom is still getting right to this day. And it's still healing to know that she's trying to get it right. So I'm a living witness that it's never too late. And so all of those gems were very valuable, Osayi, and I appreciate you so much for just coming on and sharing with us. I know you gave out your information initially on how the moms can connect with you, and I will definitely put it in the show notes. In your parenting coaching program, what are some of the benefits for the moms who, if they do decide to sign up?
Mhm. So in my program, I go more in depth with all of these things about brain science, about nervous system work and sensory, just all of that. So I have one-on-one coaching where it's like a 12-week program and we go like in depth. And most times, you know, when I do this, I'm always in awe about just how passionate parents are and how significant we are in the development of another human. And I'm always in awe when I'm working with a client and they talk about how their children have changed in the way that they respond to them, and how their children are so good at listening now and all of that. And really, it wasn't the children that changed. It was us as the parents, as the mom, that we changed. We got our own nerves down, and we figured out how to calm our brains, all of those things. So if anyone is interested in one-on-one coaching, I'm happy to connect with them. They can send me an email, hello@osayilasisi.com, or I also have a 30-day challenge that I'm always running. You can just go and sign up for the wait list. It's osayilasisi.com/waitlist. And then whenever we launch it, I'll share it with you. But yeah, like there's so many ways for us to work together.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So you moms heard it yourself. You know how to connect with her. Again, this information will be in the show notes. Again, thank you so much, Ms. Osayi, for coming on. I pray that we can stay connected, and I pray that God will continue to bless what you are doing. You're doing an amazing work. This is so needed. Parenting. parenting coaching, just providing moms with strategies. If many of us would have grasped strategies, initially, we would have saved a lot of heartache. But like you talked about, it's definitely not too late. So I'm super excited for what you are doing. I pray that you would continue to go forth as God leads you. And thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lakeisha. It's been so much fun. I'm glad that I get to share this knowledge with you all.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Praying Single Mom podcast. Until next time, guys.